right, here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Non-Victim Nation podcast. And today I am here with Brian Kovacs, who is a man of many talents, not the least of which is you are the host of your own podcast called Talking Guns.
That is
And
correct.
right on. And so I kind of wanted to start there. And you talked a little bit about how that started off as as a radio show, not an actual podcast.
Correct. It was a radio show here on, in Phoenix radio, and then was syndicated out. We had a really great following with that. I was a regular guest on the show, so it was only natural for me to take the show over from Kate, who had
Right.
originally founded the company and founded the concept.
Gotcha.
So Kate ended up working for me at my shop that I had for a
Oh,
number of
nice.
years. And so we've been good friends. I bought my first gun when I moved to Arizona 20 years ago from Kate. And that's how
Very
I met
cool.
her and stayed in contact with her. And it was really cool. So yeah, and then I took it over. I brought it to a digital platform. So we
Okay.
started doing podcasts and we started doing social media. And I knew that the one thing that I wanted to focus on with social media was doing product test and evaluations that are not paid shill giving you the
Right.
information,
Yeah.
right? There's a ton of that in the industry
Yeah.
and they don't need any more. And now if you type in almost anything and you're like, hey, I want to research, what's the best AR-15 this week or whatever,
Mhm.
you're going to get a whole bunch of things from people who are paid to give that review. Now, I'm not saying I don't make money in the industry. What I
Right.
am saying, I don't make money off of here's a product, keep the product, here's a bunch of other stuff, here's some money, give us a good review. Because
Right.
I do give not good reviews if the product isn't good. Um, but there's not a lot of people that do that.
Right.
We're far and few between.
Yeah.
So there are others, and they are good people.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of riffraff,
Right.
as I call it, a lot of static in the industry.
Yeah.
So I try to stay away from that. The other thing I do is I want people to realize how chaotic a gunfight can be. So I
Yeah.
post up a lot of the police shooting videos and civilian shooting videos because I want people to realize it's not like the movies. It's not like TV.
Mhm.
That's a choreographed and rehearsed thing. As soon as gunfire goes off, it's chaos
Yeah.
everywhere,
Right.
from officers involved to the suspects involved, to whatever. It's
Right.
civilians are a problem that are just, walking by,
Mhm.
God forbid you accidentally, you know, engage somebody and they get hit
Right.
with fragments or things like this, which that's never, part of movies or TV. They don't talk about that,
Yeah. Right.
They just start firing indiscriminately and like
Yeah.
that's not real life. So
As though people don't actually exist in any of the backgrounds of anybody that they're ever shooting.
right.
You know.
And as well as I do that if one of us gets into a shooting in a
Mhm.
civilian area,
Mhm.
grandma's gonna be walking across the street in the exact line of sight where we're gonna have to take somebody out, right? And then
Yeah.
you're responsible for every bullet that comes out of that gun.
Yes.
There's a lawyer attached to every one of them. So you
Right.
have to be prepared. Right?
Yeah.
So that's what I want people to see. I want them to realize it. And yes, it's cool to see the good guys win,
Mhm.
but I also post when the good guys screw up.
Right.
So I'm very objective in that way because it's all about learning. It's all about reality and
Mhm.
training, right? That's how I was brought up. That's how I learned in my professional career, and that's what I try to do and try to bring with talking guns is letting people see what happens and what it is.
Right. And so kind of on that point, like I've seen videos where there were like police that were firing inside like a retail store and were shooting at a suspect, but instead fired through like a clothing or
Yeah,
a dressing room
and
and hit like a young girl.
yeah, they hit her in the leg, I believe, and she
Yeah.
bled out because they hit her in the femoral.
Right.
That was a rifle situation in
Mhm.
California, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it's tragic, right?
Right.
Now they were victorious in stopping the aggressor,
Hmm.
but unfortunately took an innocent life.
Right.
And people will argue that well that's collateral damage and whatever. That's still a human life.
It
That
is.
was an innocent life,
Hmm.
right? So that's a problem.
And so here again, people will try to paint this picture depending on their perspective of things, right? So they can look at an officer and say, well, he made a bad shot and it injured an innocent situation or innocent civilian rather, and that person, whether they died or not, that was the outcome of the shooting, right? But then you take a different incident, like the guy that shot inside of a mall. I don't remember his name, but he shot from like what was it, 60 yards away,
Yeah, it
and
was. Yep. Yes.
and
He
hit.
was a kid. He was
Yeah, it
like
was like
21
a
years
21
old.
year old kid, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and he managed to hit 8 out of the 10 shots that he fired,
Correct.
okay? And luckily, he didn't hit anybody.
Right.
But then you get into this whole space of like, well, that's the delineating factor, whether he was the hero or the villain. It's
Correct.
like he managed to hit the person, right? But if any of those two other shots, or any of the shots for that matter, had gone and hit a civilian, then all of a sudden he would have been the bad guy
Correct.
instead of the hero for the day. You know?
My thoughts are this, right? It has to do a lot with training.
Yeah.
Clearly, that kid trained,
Hmm.
or he just had this innate athletic ability
Right.
to overcome those stressors and overcome that
Hmm.
situation to be victorious in that gunfight. But I think it comes back to training. The
Hmm.
more conditioned you are to, number one, the gunfire,
Hmm.
and number two, getting your sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, follow through, all those things are going to factor into any situation and any critical incident that you're going to come into.
Hmm.
So police nowadays, and since COVID, are getting a terribly small amount of training.
Hmm.
Some agencies, even here in the Valley, are
Right.
getting 0 hours a year,
That's
0 hours
ridiculous.
of training. Okay. So there's mandatory minimums yearly that
Hmm.
you have to have. And some agencies do not even send their people out for that
Right.
because they don't have enough people to cover the roads. They don't have enough people to cover, detectives and investigations and everything else. And they're barely making it by. I
Right.
mean, we've all worked for agencies where we're working
Yeah.
skeleton crews and,
Hmm.
you can't get this done. You can't get that. Oh, mail can't go out. Oh,
Right.
you know, that's a real thing.
Hmm.
So if you're not getting the training and all of a sudden you end up in this critical incident,
Hmm.
how do you think you're going to do compared to the guy who's going out even every month and
Right.
making sure that he's able to still perform and qualify,
Hmm.
right? So that's the major factor. It's
Right.
training,
Yeah.
civilian or law enforcement, doesn't
Right.
matter.
And so this is one of the things that kind of get wrapped around the axle, where like you have so much legislation trying to push for gun control and to take weapons away from civilians,
Sure.
when arguably you and I are far better trained because of the amount of sheer time that we put into it than an average police officer, and yet they're expecting that when they call the police, they're going to do or be capable of what you and I could do, and that isn't always necessarily the case.
I would say, if we look back like 15 years ago and before, police were a proactive force.
Hmm.
They would try to ensure that people were safe, basically all the time.
Hmm.
And now police have become more of a reactionary force because they don't have enough officers to do the proactivity, right?
Right.
They don't have enough time to go in and out of the stores and meet the shopkeepers and things like that and learn the neighborhood, I don't like to use the word community policing because people associate that with like, McGruff the crime dog and stuff like that,
Right.
right? Which isn't exactly what I mean. What I mean is getting to know your neighborhood, getting to know the people, getting to
Hmm.
know, your beat or your area that,
Right.
your zone that you're patrolling, right? That makes for a better police experience because now people have a personal contact with you, right? So now you don't have that. And so there's this line of delineation that I think the police feel that they're against the people.
Hmm.
And what you would see in the media would make you believe that very easily. But,
Right.
knowing plenty of police officers, like all the way up to federal agents and things like that, they're not. They don't, that's not the attitude.
Hmm.
It's more of like a situational aspect, right? So the way that I see it is that the people have lost their patience with police. Police aren't doing the same job that they used to.
Right.
They're not keeping things contained or corralled like they were.
Hmm.
And it's strictly because of they have terrible attrition. People are retiring at an alarming rate.
Right.
I mean, and let's face it, they're not filling those seats.
Hmm.
Phoenix is in critical need of people. I mean, most of the agencies in the valley. Phoenix is a lot bigger. And
Hmm.
and DOC is another one. I mean,
Right.
they're what are they, 45%, I believe they're down.
It's a ridiculous
It's
number.
it's crazy, right? To think
Yeah.
about that. So you're going into a shift with you usually run at 100 people and now you're running at 60. Well,
Yeah.
that's a big difference,
Right.
right? So how many things aren't getting done properly? How many things aren't getting done
Yeah.
safely?
Yes.
Corners get cut, right?
Hmm.
And that's what's happening on the road. That's what's happening on the streets. That's why
Right.
there's mayhem.
Yeah.
And let's face it, the lefty political views and uh, the craziness that people
Right.
have come to think is like, oh, kumbaya, we're all going to be safe and
Hmm.
happy. It's not a reality.
Right.
It's just not.
Hmm.
And one other factor that seems to never be talked about that I like to bring up is what happened to all the mental institutions?
Right.
We had a lot more mental institutions, right? Back in the day. In the 90s, there was always like, an asylum, mental institution where these people that were unfit for society. Now let's just say that they can't function normal society. They can't be employed.
Hmm.
They're prone to aggression, prone to, maybe just being insane, right?
Right.
Crazy, right? The legal term is insane.
Right.
You plead insanity in
Yes.
the case when you bludgeon somebody with a brick or whatever.
Right.
So those things are gone.
Uh-huh.
And especially here in Arizona, we have really a mental health system here
No.
that we should.
Hmm.
The mental health system is you put them in prison, you lock them away,
Right.
right? And they do their flat time instead of getting good time and getting out 40% sooner. They do their flat time and then they come out and then they're right back in the next week because they
Right.
commit another crime, right?
Right.
I think that is one of the major factors is we don't have adequate mental health
Hmm.
um, screening or application where police can go out and say, okay, listen, this guy is a danger to himself and others.
Hmm.
They call it Baker Act and things like that, where they hold somebody for 72 hours and then they're back out on the street.
Right.
That doesn't really help anything,
Yeah.
right? It's just kind of almost an abuse of the system.
Hmm.
It's just a revolving door. My thoughts are that needs to change. There needs to be some major change. And yeah, I get it. These people have rights.
Hmm.
They are still human beings.
Right.
But do you allow them
Hmm.
to terrorize, and rape and pillage and murder and things like this with impunity because
Hmm.
they don't realize the consequences of their actions?
Hmm.
I don't think that that's reasonable,
Right.
So there's
Right. And kind of on that note, you're putting them in a place like DOC, like putting them in prisons, right? The officers that are there are not trained to deal with that.
no.
They're trained to keep them constrained in the space that they're supposed to be in, right? When they come out of their cells, they're fully restrained, hands and feet, and they move to wherever they've got to go, right? But that isn't the same as actually taking care of them or addressing the issues that they have. It's only managing them at like a zookeeper level.
That's exactly it.
It's not that isn't productive for them, and it's not helping us.
It doesn't You're right. It's not productive. It doesn't do anything to solve the situation. It's a
Yeah,
temporary fix. It's a band-aid.
yeah.
That's all it is because they're just not interacting with regular society. And I've worked mental health and severe mental health, like
Hmm.
ridiculous, which you know what I mean. The things that
Right,
go on in there are people wouldn't even believe it.
right.
Um, I don't see that as being a viable option. Now, yes, they may have committed crimes. They need to do their time, 100%.
Yeah,
But there's no real treatment.
right.
There's no The recidivism rate in mental health
Mhm.
or with a mental health case to DOC has to be in the 90 percentile.
Yeah, it's
It's got to be.
ridiculous.
I
Mhm.
mean, because I've seen them come back, I don't know how many times.
Right.
I mean, and I mean, quick,
Yeah.
not like, oh, 6 years later, no, it's like right now.
Yeah.
So that's where I think there needs to be a lot of focus.
Mhm.
Gun control is not going to save anybody. It's
Mhm.
not going to help anybody. It's
Right.
an illusion of
Yeah.
security, kind of like TSA, an
Right.
illusion of
Yeah.
security, right? How many terrorists has TSA caught? I'm willing to
Eh,
bet none,
none. Right.
right? So that's the thing is like you can you can put up these smoke and mirror campaigns that the government likes to do all the
Mhm.
time and they
Right.
always skew the statistics in
Mhm.
anything.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, with gun crime they'll include suicides in gun crime.
Right.
Well, that's not a gun crime. That no one There was one intended victim which was also the aggressor, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's not gun crime.
Yeah.
So they skew it to make it sound like it's really good. It's not.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing that upsets me
Mhm.
is people should be more transparent. Like I have to be transparent in the work that I do.
Mhm.
What am I doing for these hours of work? What am I doing for, the money that I'm making? I have to be transparent with that. Why doesn't the government have to be transparent in how they handle mental health issues and
Mhm.
how they, you know, people don't worry like after the judge sentences somebody, then it's like, okay, well, we're done here. And you got to wonder what happens to these people
Right.
afterwards, right? We
Yeah.
know what happens.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's also not what most people expect just because, like, currently I work on a sex offender unit, right?
Right.
Everybody there, well, not everybody, but the vast majority of them there are victims, or not victims, but they are convicted for rape, for child molestation,
Sure.
for like any number of other like related things, right? You know, and I have to imagine that, and I don't know if I've talked about this before or not, but like if you imagine the family that's going to court and they're watching the proceedings and they find out that this person is being convicted and they're going to prison, they have to assume on some level that they're being punished. That there's something, there's some repercussion for the actions that these people have taken, right?
Sure.
And instead, when you get to the unit, you find out that they're walking around unmanaged all day long. They're allowed to go out to rec, they're allowed to sit and play video games, because you know, these are the things that they're being furnished with. This is the punishment for what they've done. It's like, how is that okay?
They get ice cream,
Yeah,
they get
yeah,
iPads, they
yeah,
get, it's ridiculous, right? I
hmm
mean, they still do pizzas?
yeah. They still do
Yeah,
quote unquote fundraisers where they're
yeah.
allowed to have just any number of like things that they shouldn't ever have as
I've always said if
inmates.
people knew how it really worked in there, and not like from the officer's perspective, but I mean from the way that the system is set up.
Hmm.
If people knew what it really looked like in there and what really happens on a day to day, they would be really pissed off of where their tax dollars are going.
Oh yeah.
And it's unfortunate that people don't care enough to look into that.
Hmm.
And look, it can't be just us here in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's got to be like that across the country.
Right.
And I can only imagine it's worse on the East Coast.
Yeah.
It's got to be. But you're right. The problem is that you would think that if somebody committed some heinous sexual act against a family member of yours, that this guy is going to be punished, imprisoned, you'd probably hope even tortured at some
Yeah.
level,
Right.
right? To have some sort of a relief but it's not like that.
Hmm.
They like you said, they play baseball, they work out, they do, which they're not allowed weights, but they do
Yeah.
all kinds of other workout things, right?
No, they actually are.
Oh, they have their weights now?
Yeah, they use
Been out
kettlebells and weights and
been out of the game for too long.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's upsetting, right? I
Hmm.
mean, uh, once upon a time, there was a friend of mine who was involved in a very popular case that became a movie,
Hmm.
and he got sent to prison as a white collar guy because there was some money laundering going on.
Okay.
And he got to go on nature hikes in the mountains, right? There was a golf course next to this prison.
Right.
He would get to play once a month. They would get to play 18 holes of golf. They had personal trainers that would come in and train groups of them, and they could sign up for, tennis or whatever. And this was federal prison. Yeah.
Jesus
Okay.
Christ.
So this wasn't 100 years ago. This was
Right.
in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can't imagine it's changed that much since
Hmm.
then, you know, but prison isn't what people think, what they see in
Right.
the movies or they see
Right.
on, TV shows about. It's not like that. Now, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. There are some units that
Oh
are
yeah.
absolute gladiator school, and
Yeah.
those people are a different thing, and I have vast experience with specifically that.
Mhm.
But the majority of prison is like community college.
Right.
That's basically what it is. It's the same. It's a regimented thing where they get breakfast, they get lunch, they get dinner, they get their medical, they get everything. It's like basically your ultimate communist situation.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's what it is. The government tells you what to do. They tell you where you need to be, but there's really no quote unquote real treatment or you know a way to wash those negative things out of people.
Right.
I mean, you see programs,
Hmm.
but it's basically like going to AA.
Yeah.
There's no substance to it.
Right.
It's like the bare minimum, unfortunately.
Yeah. They can just like sit in the class, nod their heads,
Right.
you know,
They don't have to be
say
an
all the
active
right things, and
participant,
then yeah,
you know?
and just go along. You know.
Exactly. And it's a shame. It really is. Honestly, I've always said the criminals that are in prison learn how to become better criminals from the criminals who are there already. That's
Right.
what it is.
Yeah.
Is they're honing their craft when they're there to be better on the outside.
Hmm.
And that's what happens because you know why? They get more connections, they get more contacts, the same way you and I would if we go to a networking event or a conference. That's what they do in prison. And
Right.
they get to know these people and they trust these people. And then there's that, honor amongst thieves kind of mentality. Right.
Right.
And it's even worse with the sex offenders.
Hmm.
You've got, I mean, I've heard, seen, and witnessed some heinous stuff that has gone on, and they brag about what they've done in prison,
Hmm.
which is like if people knew that that's how it was, I don't think
Yeah.
they would be happy. I really don't.
No, I
You
would
know,
hope not.
I mean,
But
and now DOC is $1 billion+ a year that they're getting in funding.
yeah,
That's a lot of taxpayer dollars.
but they managed to cut down all that spending by totally removing all of our overtime.
I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
punish the officers, of course. When everything's going bad, punish the officers. It's
Yeah.
kind of like when things are not looking good in the in the towns and the cities, tax them some more.
Yeah.
Then it'll resolve the problem, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, and that is absurd because there's not enough people staffing the units. There's a critical core staffing that you need to have for public safety, and they pencil whip the numbers to make it look like it's good, and it's not.
Yeah.
That's deeply disturbing, especially to someone like me who understands the
Right.
consequences of those actions,
Yeah.
right? The public only knows like, oh, a guy escaped, or what? How did he escape?
Yeah. Exactly.
But
Hmm.
what all went into that? How
Hmm.
many people maybe were involved in that?
Hmm.
These are things that are often overlooked, unfortunately.
Right.
But it's happening in police work too.
Yeah.
I mean, where you used to have people riding two to a car, now you maybe have one guy for 20 miles.
Right.
And like your nearest backup's 20 minutes away. Well, what if you
Mhm.
get into a critical incident where you're getting shot at, or you have to shoot somebody? Like,
Right.
who's securing that scene?
Yeah.
Like, these are real things that are really happening, like
Hmm.
really in your neighborhood, and at least in ours.
Right. Yeah.
you know, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it's a crazy time to be in law enforcement. I commend you for still being there. I
Hmm.
think that's great. It's amazing. Um, and I still believe that it is a great career. It's great
Yeah.
to be in. It's service to your community. It's service to the public, but there needs to be a complete overhaul of the paradigm that is law enforcement and what the expectations are,
Hmm.
because people hold everybody in law enforcement, no matter what it is, to this like umpth degree and put them on this pedestal of like, how could they make this mistake? They're trained, but they don't
But
realize they're not.
yeah.
They're not. I mean, you may get 10 minutes of that in the academy,
Mhm.
and then you get thrown into some situation that doesn't go anything like that situation that you did,
Right.
or that scenario, and you're expected to, be able to handle it. Come on.
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of these officers, they can't even fight people on the street, or in the prisons.
Right.
I mean, because they're just not trained enough. There's rules to how they teach you how to fight. Guess who doesn't have rules? The guy who wants to bludgeon your head in.
Right.
He doesn't have rules.
Yeah.
He just knows he wants to kill you. Right.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's what always upsets me. And I've done law enforcement training across the country for a number of years,
Hmm.
and uh, I've seen these departments get more and more lax
Hmm.
over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And it continues to get worse and worse and worse and worse. They want to stop making the officers look like they're military. Well, then okay, let them all wear plain clothes. Then that would stop that,
Right.
right? Oh, the uniform is very imposing and
Yeah.
intimidating.
Intimidating. That's the word
Or
they
the
use.
best one I heard was from right here. You can't wear mirrored sunglasses because it's intimidating. What? What?
And yet
Like,
the inmates are allowed to wear them.
but I mean, who thinks of these things?
Yeah.
Like, I've never walked up to somebody randomly and been like, "Your mirrored sunglasses are intimidating to me. Could you take those off?"
Hmm.
Like, that's insane.
Right.
Um, who thinks that way? But evidently somebody does, and they make it
Hmm.
a rule, right?
So I just recently learned, and maybe I should have already known this, but the director is appointed by the mayor or the governor,
The
rather.
governor. Yeah.
Okay. So in our instance, where our governor, who's not really the governor,
Right.
Katie Hobbs,
Right.
who got to oversee her own election. Okay, that's a whole other thing. Okay, she appointed the director that we have currently, who his level of experience is dealing with level two inmates. And so he's trying to base all of his policies, everything that we do on that experience. It's like that does not work. You can't take people that were, accused of, or they were, they're in prison because they had too many traffic citations or just misdemeanor kind of things, and compare that to people that are the absolute worst of the worst that you can imagine, people who are really deadly and violent. And there's a reason why they have to be restrained everywhere they go. Those two things are not equal.
Well, touching on the first thing that you said, I'm Italian. I'm originally from Jersey. We
Hmm.
invented corruption. And so corruption here in Arizona is at
Yeah.
a level that's like unbelievable to people from there,
Hmm.
because it's right in your face. It's obvious. They
Yeah.
don't try to hide it. At
Hmm.
least back there, they try to be like subversive about it. Like, they
Yeah.
don't want it out in the open. They don't want people to know, but people just stay in charge, and then they appoint their cousin and
Yeah.
their brother, their uncle, whatever, you know. But here, it's just like, hey, here I am. I did this a little underhanded, but what are you going to do about it?
Right.
It's almost like they're taunting us, they're
Hmm.
challenging us, which is it's sickening.
Mhm.
I used to call this Free America, Arizona, because I came from the People's Republic of New Jersey. And I love Arizona still to this
Right.
day, but I can't I can't see the possibility that Arizona could be a blue state. Like
Mhm.
I just feasibly can't see that from all of the people that I interact with on a daily basis from all different walks of life. It just seems completely impossible to me. But
Mhm.
it has happened, right?
Mhm.
And I think that it's happened due to a combination of things. I think it's happened due to all the people fleeing California and Oregon and Washington
Mhm.
and fleeing here because of the prices being so much cheaper and they can live a much better life for a lot less.
Mhm.
And that has obviously directly impacted
Right.
our voting and the way it has become here. But these policies that have come out for law enforcement and for these cities, like, you can't keep homeless people out off of your lawn and, squatters' rights that have gotten
Right.
ridiculously extreme where people are living for free in other people's houses. I mean, these are big problems.
Mhm.
And the, there's not a lot of solutions, right?
Mhm.
They want you to go through this maniacal system of red tape to try to just get your own stuff back.
Right.
That's never helpful.
Mhm.
But they don't have any red tape taking anything they want from you. They
Right.
just do it right now.
Yeah.
And it's a regular thing. The rest of that, the rest of what we were talking about, you've got what I see and what I hear with law enforcement is there's such a morale issue.
Mhm.
Most of the guys don't even want to do the job anymore, right?
Right.
I mean, guys that are actually already working there,
Mhm.
they dread going to work every day because it's like every day they have a hand tied behind their back or both hands tied behind their back, and they're not able to do this, they're not able to do that because it's the policy has changed or perception has changed or whatever. That's not good for those officers for their mental health.
Mhm.
And that's not good for the public in general, for their safety and stuff.
Mhm.
There are plenty of rules and regulations already in effect. We don't need more. What we
Mhm.
need is we need to trim those things down and curtail those to the most important and start teaching people to be discretionary.
Right.
That's one of the things that we've lost in law enforcement. You don't have to write everyone a ticket that you pull over. You
Right.
don't have to arrest every person that maybe should be arrested,
Mhm.
right? We have to get back to that. We have to get back to where there's discretion and you can say, you know what? Do I really want to ruin this kid's life? He just turned 18.
Mhm.
Does he really need this arrest on his record, right?
Mhm.
Does he really need that expense?
Mhm.
That, and I think that's pushing people too, is people see that as almost like unfair or unjust that, the police are picking on them and stuff.
Mhm.
But that's not really the case. It's just that they're taught differently,
Right.
right? You, were taught differently in the academy than I was taught in the
Mhm.
academy. We went to the same academy, but at different times,
Right.
right? Doing the same job per se, but different errors of
Right.
when the rules and regulations are, or to what extent they are.
Yeah.
I think people, again, I think this routes back to training,
Mhm.
and I think it routes back to the general public not being involved in what's happening with their tax dollars.
Mhm.
Because once it's gone, it's gone. They pay
Right.
it out and it's over with, right?
Yeah.
So you have a director that is well. You said inmates aren't they residents now?
Yes. Yes, they are.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. He lists them like in his literature. He lists them as individuals. He will no longer
yeah,
refer to them as inmates.
and where that used to be a solid rule, you don't call an inmate anything other than an inmate,
Right.
right? So that's a change. That's a mental thing.
Mhm.
That's what that is, right?
Yeah.
But you still have a name badge on,
Right.
and they know your name,
Mhm.
right? Your name isn't, your name is out there in the open.
Right.
Theirs isn't all the time, right?
Yeah.
The directors, I think, I would like to see the directors of these departments like the corrections work
Mhm.
several years in the trenches,
Mhm.
actually having to like run keys at Central or
Right.
pass trays like at SMU or Browning
Right.
or anything like that.
Mhm.
Have to do that for a couple of years to understand what it's actually like because they sit there in the ivory tower in
Mhm.
Phoenix and they have no clue.
Right.
They don't have any assimilation to what's happening.
Mhm.
And they don't know the realities of having to power wash shit off of the walls,
Right.
right? Because somebody decides to make artwork.
Shit or blood or whatever else they can.
Yeah, God
Yeah.
knows what else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it all.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. They don't have that idea. And then they don't have an idea of how to handle that when it does happen.
Mhm.
Because then it's like, oh, who do we call?
So on that note, when the director does come to the units, that motherfucker shows up with 4 to 6 really large security people to protect him.
Mhm.
It's like, I thought they were all individuals. I thought they were deserving of compassion and understanding. It's like,
Right.
where is that with all the security?
But they're just like you.
Mhm,
They're just like you. They're just officers too, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah. It's look, that is a show for you.
Uh-huh.
They show up like that for you. So you're like, oh look, that's the big shot. Right.
Mhm.
And I think that perception again plays into that.
Yeah.
It's to perceive that that person's powerful, right?
Mhm.
He doesn't actually walk the yard without that yard being super secure, without
Oh, yeah.
TSU being on the roofs,
Right.
without a bunch of people being planted all over the place, right?
Mhm.
It's a dog and pony show
Right.
of the finest order,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Right.
And so you're never going to get a real response, a real reaction, a real or real um, call to action, and that being taken by a director because they're
Yeah.
just not there doing it.
Right.
They're not on the ground, and they have no clue. They get to read the after action reports and the critical incident reports, the SIRs,
Right.
and
Yeah,
they're
we're
like,
gonna
okay,
be under ICS when they show up.
yeah. I mean, they should.
They should.
A good director would do that. And
Yeah.
and think of the respect that you would have
Mhm.
having the director come out for an emergency like that.
Yeah.
Even if they were an hour late because they're not near there.
Mhm.
Think of how much differently you would perceive them
Mhm.
and how much more you would respect them for being there.
It would
Right?
be a lot different.
Exactly. It would be.
Yeah.
Even if they pass you by and didn't even say hello to you, you'd be like, at least that motherfucker's there.
Yeah.
Like that's cool.
Right.
Like, right. I mean, I've seen police chiefs. I mean, look at Sheriff Lamb.
Mhm.
He does traffic stops. He
Mhm.
goes out there and he works.
Right.
He's a great human being. I've known him for a great many years.
Yeah.
And he's a true believer,
Yeah.
real constitutionalist,
Mhm.
and I hope he becomes our next senator.
So do I.
He's a fantastic individual.
Mhm.
But he goes out there and he works with the troops
Mhm.
and he's not afraid to do that.
Right.
That's inspiring.
Yeah. He is somebody I still really hope to get onto this podcast because I would love to sit and have a conversation with him.
We'll discuss that after the
Yeah.
podcast.
Because, and I have just tremendous respect for him and everything that he does, and I will be the first in line to support him in everything that he wants to accomplish as a senator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I say that his agency is the one that I tell people to go work for.
Mhm.
You may not get paid the highest pay in the area, but it's not about that. It's about your working environment. It's about
Mhm.
your line officers. It's about who are you going to have to answer to when something goes wrong. That department is tip top, and
Mhm.
and even the chief deputies, everybody there, they're fantastic people, and I truly believe that that is the agency to work for in Arizona.
Mhm.
Um, they're very down to earth.
Right.
And I think that that is an agency that exercises a lot of discretion.
Mhm.
Do you watch the Fridays with Frank episodes?
I've heard about that.
Oh my
I've
God, it's
seen some of them.
fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
people are such dumbasses. I swear to
Right.
God. But he's perfectly exercising discretion in that
Right.
show, and it's great. And some people are like, oh, he shouldn't be out there ticketing people and pulling them. Look, if you don't have that,
Uh-huh.
look, I was taught many years ago that tickets or citations
Mhm.
are utilized to correct behavior.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be a revenue generating source.
Ideally, no.
Right. Talk to Gilbert PD, they have a different idea of that.
Right.
But I think that that is what it should be. You
Right.
should be trying to correct people's behavior.
Mhm.
So they get a little sting because it hits them in the pocket.
Right.
You take up their time, so now it complicates their day,
Mhm.
and they're supposed to learn a lesson from that.
Ideally, yes.
Some people are just incorrigible,
Yeah.
unable to learn from their own mistakes.
Right. That's why we
Right?
have prisons.
Exactly. So, and don't get me wrong, I am not holier than thou. I assure you, I break plenty of traffic laws on a daily
Right.
basis, whether it's unintentionally or intentionally, whatever.
Right.
But what I'm saying is discretion
Yeah.
is the most powerful thing officers have on their bat belt of accessories.
Right.
It's not their gun, it's not their pepper spray, it's not their taser, it's discretion.
Yeah.
That's how I came up. That's how I learned. And I don't think that's taught anymore.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of academies have gotten to this point. Like, I got into a conversation on another show about this.
Mhm.
It takes 2.5 times the amount of hours to become a barber than it does to be a police officer. Why is that? Yeah,
Yeah.
Google it. Check it out. I mean, I am dead serious. Look at it for Arizona. The amount of hours you have to do to be an officer versus the amount of hours you have to do to become a barber.
It's ridiculous.
It's 2.5 times. It might be even more now. I don't know.
Right.
I could be 3 times now. I
Yeah.
don't know. But when I looked that up, it was
Yeah.
absurd, right? So to cut hair, you have substantially more hours
Hmm.
to learn how to do that than to deal with the public at their best and at their worst
Right.
and deal with critical incidents that traumatize some people to even mention that. I mean, it's not easy to talk about, hey, listen, there's a motor vehicle accident, there's an infant crushed in the back,
Yeah.
right? People are like, oh, don't tell me that. Don't
Yeah.
say that kind of thing, right? What if you got to do that? Like, what if that was an every week occurrence for you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you've got to mentally process that. You have to become
Hmm.
an expert in compartmentalization,
Yeah.
right? Otherwise, you're going to drink,
Yeah. Where
maybe
you just
illicit
stop
drugs.
functioning.
You're gonna do something to quell that fire
Hmm.
that's brewing inside you, right?
Right.
And so you have to learn how to compartmentalize. You guys had to learn that too. I mean,
Hmm.
because things are going to happen at the joint, and you're gonna go home and remember, hey, I can't kick the dog. I
Yeah.
can't, right?
Right.
You got to decompress on your way home. You got to
Hmm.
figure out your own way of doing that, and every individual has to do that. That's something that's not focused on anymore.
Hmm.
You didn't learn any of that in the academy. I guarantee it.
Hmm.
There was no uh, talk of that. Fortunately, I was taught that years ago,
Hmm.
and I was taught how to break things up. And I was told basically, you put that uniform on, you're Officer Kovacs.
Hmm.
When you take that uniform off, you're Brian again.
Hmm.
Don't ever cross those two. It's
Right.
almost like a split personality,
Right.
but you have to be able to assume that role when that uniform is on. When
Hmm.
the uniform is off, you don't always have to act. You can choose to act at that point,
Hmm.
right? But you don't always have to act. When you have it on, you have to.
Right.
There is no like choice at that point, right?
Hmm.
So, that and a lot of other things, they went by the wayside. And
Hmm.
it's produced these officers that are, for lack of a better term, they're rats. They don't respect their other officers.
Right.
They try to get their other officers in trouble to gain popularity or to gain special assignments or whatever, because they don't have a way of earning it.
Hmm.
A lot of them, I mean, I'm a firm believer in earn it, you know,
Definitely. Hmm.
I don't care what your education is. I don't care if you have a master's degree, doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Show me you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. You can have a master's degree in electrical engineering and redo the electric in my house and burn it down. It doesn't
Right.
doesn't mean anything to me that you have the education.
Right.
I want to know that you have the practical application,
Hmm.
that you can actually do it.
Hmm.
Right. So sure, education is an aptitude,
Hmm.
100%, but that isn't the end all be all.
Right.
Not for me. Not I'm sure not for you either.
Yeah.
If I show up on my first date, I'm like, hey, I have a doctorate degree in public administration. You mean that's great? Let's go beat the shit out of this guy,
Yeah.
right? Because he's trying to beat the shit out of us.
Right.
So what do you do? Do a thesis on that? No, you need to get physical, right?
Right.
Very different things. Okay, so that's what people don't realize that.
Yeah.
There's no school you're going to go to,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, there's no academy you're going to go to prepare you to work in the SMU units.
Right.
It's a carnage all to itself.
Yeah. No matter how much they explain it or try to prepare you for that environment, you
Right.
you won't understand it until you're there and you're dealing with it.
Well, you've got guys that show up right out of the academy that quit the first day
Yeah.
because they're like, "Hey, I didn't know it was going to be like this.
Hmm.
I didn't know they were going to be in my face. I didn't know they were going to yell at me. Like, really? What did you think?
Right.
Like, it's not some like this isn't summer camp.
Yeah.
It's prison. These
Mhm.
people don't want to be here, and now
Right.
they've made it where the officers don't want to be there either.
Right.
It's terrible,
Yeah.
So, and it's not a laughing matter, but
Mhm.
having done it and having seen it and experienced it, it's like who is thinking of these things? Who is coming up with these ideas?
Yeah.
It's it's mind-boggling.
Hmm.
Um, there's a guy I'll put you in touch with too that you should talk with and you should have on your podcast. His name's Anthony Ganji. He's
Okay.
over in New Jersey. He's I believe he's an associate warden or something now. He's high up. He's a
Hmm.
great guy. I've done a bunch of his podcasts.
Right.
Fantastic dude, super educated, but he's a real leader. He's a real guy.
Hmm.
He's not a politician, and that's how you need to be. Unfortunately,
Right.
people want to be politicians.
Yeah.
You know, and don't get me wrong. Like on that subject, we were talking about Sheriff Lamb.
Hmm.
Sheriff Lamb is one of those rare instances where he is super respected by his guys,
Hmm.
and he's super respected by the public.
Hmm.
That is very
That's
odd,
yeah.
right? That is an anomaly. It's
Hmm.
not the typical, because usually it's one or the other.
Hmm.
Either your guys love you because you always back them and you're
Hmm.
always there for them and you have a
Right.
great support system and everything like that, or they hate you because all you're about is being a politician out there to the public and running dog and pony shows all day,
Right.
right? So he has both, and he manages both, I think, very well.
Yeah, he
And
does.
and he's not flamboyant about it. He's not like in your face about it. He's just very matter of fact, and
Hmm.
that to me is refreshing.
Right.
That really is,
Hmm.
you know. And I like how raw he is when he does, interdictions with the illegals and things like that that are being trafficked, and
Hmm.
that he gets out there and he does the work, and his
Right.
men do the work, and women do the
Right.
work,
Hmm.
as well. And that is phenomenal,
Hmm.
phenomenal. We haven't seen that in a director since Meg Savage.
Yeah.
That's the only director that I would say had that kind of,
Hmm.
not to the level that Sheriff Lamb does, but had that kind of
Hmm.
respect of the peers,
Right.
of the officers.
Yeah.
Uh,
So when I started, Director Shin was in place. Um, and I don't really have much to say about him one way or the other because we didn't really ever hear too much
right.
about him. It was just kind of the daily grind of whatever was going on. But when this new director came in, that's when everything it was really obvious that he had a completely different perspective about how things needed to be done, how we needed to treat the inmates. So we went from a place where we actually could physically restrain them, do what was necessary to manage the unit, to now we're not allowed to have any physical interaction. You know, we're not even allowed to curse. You know, you can't say
Okay.
fuck to an inmate, which is ridiculous. Okay. You're going to hurt
Ridiculous.
their feelings.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the same time, he's encouraging behavior, which has never been acceptable before. Now they're saying it's okay for us to fist bump inmates.
You're allowed to touch inmates,
Yeah.
not physically, like,
Yeah.
to restrain them.
Right. And things like that.
Do you
It's
like
like
their cigarettes for them too?
pretty soon,
Yeah.
you know,
Like,
but at the direction.
didn't have a lighter for me
Right.
when I asked. I'm
Yeah.
writing them up.
Right. And so
Wow.
that's how things are progressing. They're moving 100% the wrong direction, you know?
So I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
How does that make you feel on the daily, interacting with them and
Hmm.
doing your job, with
So,
that, having that be instilled now?
okay. So this has just been my own perspective from the time that I started and across the different units that I've worked in.
Right.
I try very hard not to know anything about the inmates because I don't want to be judging them based on why they're there or what their history is, whatever. It's everything is just on a day-to-day basis. If you're an asshole, I'm going to treat you like an asshole. It's just kind of how it is.
That's the old
Um,
adage: approach determines response.
yeah, exactly.
Right. That's
And I try to move forward with that perspective. So regardless of what's going on the administration side or whatever else, on a day-to-day basis, I still treat them just appropriately for whatever the situation is. Somebody who has been respectful, who is doing everything that is in compliance when I ask them to be, that person I can walk by and say, "Hey, how you doing?" you know, and have like a little small talk and whatever and keep it very civil, right?
Mhm.
Somebody who's just an absolute asshole, it's like I don't curse them, I don't treat them negatively necessarily, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to be overly cordial with them either. It's like, hey, move, or you need to stop doing that or whatever. And if they're really doing something they're not supposed to be, then you get a ticket. And there's not a lot of conversation about that. For them to come up and want to negotiate with me afterwards and say, well, hey, I'm having all these other things going on and whatever. It's like, well, that's fine, but that doesn't change the fact that you were someplace you weren't supposed to be. You already knew that you're not allowed to be in a different dorm than the one you live in. We've had this conversation more than once. I've given you more than one warning. Now you have a ticket. That's kind of all there is to it. And so I approach everything from that perspective and I just do the job regardless of all the other kind of factors. I don't allow that to intrude upon how I interact with them. And over the course of the time that I've been there, which again is only been 3 years, but in that space of time, at any unit that I'm in, I feel that I've built a lot of rapport with the inmates. They know who I am, they know what to expect, and they know that I'm very consistent. I'm not going to be an asshole one day and their best friend the next day. Okay. So as long as I keep doing that, I feel like I'm more safe than average and that things are just going to progress. I can keep that manner of doing things, even though I disagree heavily with the way that the department is being run. You know, um, and I think that that's how we all need to progress. That's how we all need to be doing our jobs.
I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, consistency is key,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the thing is because then that's how they gauge how to trust you or how to
Hmm.
know if they can approach you or anything like that. And I think that that is important.
Yeah.
Um, it, it's got to be very demoralizing having these kinds of things come into play.
Hmm.
Where they're literally given more abilities than you are as an officer.
Yeah.
There's more leeway for them,
Hmm.
and you're held to this standard in there that's kind of unachievable.
Right.
You know, it's yeah, that's a world. I, I could never see myself going back into that world.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I enjoyed my time there. Made some
Hmm.
great friends that have been friends of mine for the last 20 years. Trust them with
Hmm.
my life still to this day.
Right.
Um, but I just couldn't see myself going back to it.
Hmm.
It's not possible.
So, as much as I disagree with the way that the department is being run, I especially disagree with this particular director and his viewpoint on things. I joined the army when I was 17. I've lived my life in a way that is very disciplined, right? And I tend to view everything through that lens, right? I may not like what's going on. I may not like the way things are going, but we have a job to do. And I show up and I do that job. Okay. At the end of the day, I make sure that I'm safe, that my coworkers are safe, and the staff is safe. And after that, that the inmates are safe. Okay. You know, literally in that order. But I still think that things need to change. But I also know that my being there, regardless of how good I am at what I do, is not going to change the direction of the department. Okay. And so at the earliest opportunity I have, I'm going to leave the department. Okay. And pursue things like the podcast and other things that I've got going on, other outside interests that I believe help society and help people be better because I have the ability to have that influence on people. Whereas at the department, I don't have that.
Uh,
The best that I can do there is be a babysitter for adults who can't manage themselves.
Correct. Yeah, no, it's great to have a voice, and it's great to
Mm.
be able to have that voice be listened to by people,
Yeah.
that you don't even know. Your
Yeah.
audience is a
Hmm.
is a big factor in your success. I think that that's great. I think it's great that you're looking to get out of there. There are a lot of officers that, I'm going to say this, going to hurt a lot of feelings, but they feel like they're trapped there. They
Hmm.
feel like they're prisoners themselves,
Right.
whether they want to admit it or not. And
Hmm.
I've had some deep conversations with some guys over the years, and some girls over the years
Hmm.
that work there, and they've got to realize that that isn't their only option. I mean,
Right.
let's face it, you could work at Costco for about the same amount of money you're making at DOC,
Right.
right? And what are your chances of being stabbed with a shank at Costco?
Yeah.
Probably pretty friggin' low,
Pretty low.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing. I mean, you're not going to get thrown on at Costco. I could probably bet money on that,
Right.
right? And by getting thrown on, you
Yes.
know what I mean.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think that that's a great opportunity for you. You realize you can get out.
Hmm.
Don't lose that mentality.
Yeah.
Don't trade it for a promotion or
Hmm.
advancement or anything like that because there's something out there for you that is much greater than
Hmm.
DOC.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I encourage guys all the time. I mean, some of them take longer than others to
Hmm.
realize that, and that's okay. People have families and children they got to support, and wives they have to support, or
Right.
they need the medical, that kind
Hmm.
of stuff. I get it, and I'm not
Hmm.
telling everybody just go out on your own and jump off the cliff and
Right.
hope everything's going to be okay. But have a plan.
Yeah.
Have a 3-year plan, 5-year plan.
And I know that the perspective is different for other people because of different factors, either because they've already been there 10 plus years and they're vested, they have a pension on the line and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. So there's a legitimate reason for them to stay and keep doing what they're doing,
Sure.
right? Then there are the other types of people that literally it's like, what else would they be doing if this isn't it? It's like their personality type fits this environment. It's like for them, this is perfect, regardless of all the ups and downs of the department. It's like they're going to continue to do what they're doing, and they're always going to be there, which is great for them,
I agree.
But there are people like myself and other people that I know that are capable of doing way more than what we are and have the ability to make, again, without sounding grandiose, try to make the world a better place. At least try to make an effort to do something greater and have an impact that we know we're never going to have in DOC, no matter how good we are.
Correct. I applaud you for that, man. I think that's great. And anybody that DOC or otherwise that wants to explore the option of getting out,
Hmm.
maybe doing something else, feel free to get in touch with me.
Yeah.
Talking guns, all one word on
Right.
Instagram and Facebook. I'll help you out.
Yeah.
You know,
So I kind of want to get back more to that because I know that you're going to
yeah,
be starting this up again.
yes.
So kind of like, what is your vision of like how that progresses from here?
So right now, our vision of Talking Guns, we kind of got off track
Hmm.
because of COVID.
Hmm.
And so during COVID, there was nothing happening in the gun industry. There was no new products. They didn't even have SHOT Show, which is the largest weapon trade show in the country. Um, all that stuff went by the wayside, and it took a little while to get back. And so now everything is back. So we're going to re up the podcast. I'm going to try to bring on as many people as I can from the industry that are, my personal friends, as well as just random owners and
Hmm.
production designers and things like that,
Hmm.
to have a deep conversation with them. Like, I want to know what makes somebody tick. Like, I want to know why they do what they do. Like,
Right.
why did you decide to change this? Why did you decide to embark down this road?
Hmm.
Why wasn't XYZ good enough that
Hmm.
you decided to get there? I want to know those things because I'm just naturally inquisitive.
Right.
Number one. Number two, I want to know what makes people tick,
Yeah.
you know? So there's a lot of people in this industry that I have a lot of respect for, and I would like to learn more. I'm also going to go to their locations. So we'll get tours of facilities where things are made,
Hmm.
ammunition, weapons, knives, all of that. I'm going to cover all those things and travel around doing that. So that's my
Nice.
2024 plan. We're instituting it very soon.
Hmm.
Just trying to get all that together and get the guys together to do it.
Right.
That's the logistical part, and
Hmm.
that's on me. But I think we'll probably have everything rolling by the time NRA comes around.
Okay.
So, and then from there, we're going to start doing some featurettes on different companies and their manufacturing and things like that. What makes their
Nice.
manufacturing better? What makes their,
Right. Right.
that's what I want to do, and I want to highlight that. And I'm not going to do that where they pay me to show up.
Hmm.
That's not what I want to do. I'm going
Yeah.
to do it generally because I'm interested in their product,
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. I want it to be an honest and like kind of organic approach. I don't
Hmm.
want to be coerced into doing something or because I get a free rifle or something like that.
Right.
I've had the opportunity to work for a lot of people in the industry,
Hmm.
all the way up to the heavy hitters
Hmm.
and big time military suppliers and contractors in the industry.
Right.
And you know, I like to say I know people from Yale to jail. So
Right.
um,
Yeah.
my thing is I'm going to utilize those contacts to try to show people a different side of the industry.
Mhm.
So it's not just me or one of my guys sitting on the range shooting a gun that they'll maybe never obtain. Maybe
Right.
now they'll understand, hey, listen, a lot of craftsmanship, a lot of development, a lot of idea went behind this thing. And
Hmm.
you know what? I'm going to save up for that. Or
Right.
I'm going to, like me, I sold a few things
Hmm.
to buy a particular firearm
Right.
because I wanted that, but I couldn't justify the cost of that in my head.
Right.
Right. So I was like, man, this thing is outrageously expensive, but it's amazing.
Hmm.
And so I said, you know what? Let me sell a few things I don't use to acquire that item.
Yeah.
So maybe it helps people get into that
Hmm.
mentality as well and look at things objectively.
Right.
And so that's my goal with it.
Right.
Yeah. So I also want to cover shooting events. I don't think like shooting events are covered really at all. So for
No, not
instance,
typically.
like the Camp Perry competitions and things like that, where these guys are making these incredible long range shots.
Yeah.
We're also going to have a focus on ELR, extreme long range.
Okay.
People are shooting out to 2 miles and things like
Yeah.
that. That's going to be another focus of ours.
Mhm.
So because it's an interest, it's a challenge,
Right.
and I love a challenge.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about shooting. It's a little bit like powerlifting or weightlifting.
Hmm.
You're never going to be the best at it, but
Yeah.
you can always try to be better,
Right.
and you can work towards aspiring to get to that level.
Hmm.
And that's what I think keeps me interested in the shooting industry.
Hmm.
It's not because I'm a gun nut and I have 500 guns. I don't. I
Yeah.
have I have a very medium-sized collection of very rare things.
Hmm.
Everybody thinks I have like, hundreds of different guns, and it's not true.
Right.
I have things that I particularly like or that I know are very limited production. And
Mhm.
I want to obtain that.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong, there are things, Beretta guy, so I have a whole bunch of Beretta
Yeah.
92s of
Hmm.
every variant, size, shape, and color.
Nice.
I put out a Christmas picture every year with the Die Hard playing and my MP5s and a P7
Right.
and all my Berettas and a nice shoulder holster,
Right.
Galco shoulder holster.
That's awesome.
I do that every year. but still, there
Yeah.
for the most part,
Yeah.
I am yes, I am a gun guy, and yes, I have guns, but I don't have hundreds and hundreds of different
Right.
weapons, you know.
Yeah.
So
It's one of those things like I know people who have, especially if they're in the gun industry, like they sell firearms or they sell related things, they'll tend to have like multiples of the same thing, like AR-15, for instance, right? It's like, well, how many of those are you actually going to shoot? It's like you have them all, but like, are you, if you're not putting them to use, then aside from like having them displayed on a wall somewhere where you can just see them or show them off to people, it's like, well, what's the point of having that? Why not have something? I guess this gets into just my own personal interest. Like I've gotten really into like revolvers
mhm.
and old like cowboy style firearms. Like old Colt 45s. The kind you see, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, like
You know,
long Colts.
yeah,
Yeah,
I just love those things and lever action rifles. I
it's
think they're
nostalgic.
amazing.
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so stuff
I,
like
I
that.
I get it. I get that. I have I'm a manufacturer of AR-15s. I have my own brand. I've had you know contracts for years
Mhm.
with different groups and things like that, and law enforcement. There's agencies across the country that are using my product. I'm a big fan of the AR-15 if it's built correctly.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of the platform as like these entry level guns. There's a lot of companies. Look, if you're not spending my opinion is this: if you're not spending probably over $1,200 for your gun, the
Mhm.
components in it are subpar. You've got injection molded metal components, you've got Taiwanese or Chinese parts, you've
Right.
got something or cast parts. Something is not correct there.
Hmm.
Um, I everything that I build is the same as I build a machine gun. So if I'm building as a machine gun for the government,
Right.
it's the exact same parts other than the selector and fire control group and things like that
Hmm.
that are going to be supplied to you as a civilian.
Right.
So that's how I am. I coined the term like I do purpose built weaponry.
Right.
So if you're operating in a certain theater and you're doing X, Y, and Z, and you need that weapon to perform, that's what we do.
Hmm.
Now we're getting into precision bolt action rifles
Yeah.
in calibers that are very different
Hmm.
than these are not rack rifles, and they are not priced like rack rifles because each one is going to be an individual endeavor.
Right.
But we have a way of doing it that people aren't taking that care
Hmm.
in manufacturing firearms anymore, and we want to bring that back.
Hmm.
There are companies out there like Perazi and you know even Knights Armament, things like that. But how many people are buying $3,900 AR-15s
Not very many.
or $50,000 double barrel shotguns? Not many people, right?
Right.
So we're not going to be that level of crazy, but
Hmm.
we are going to be at a level that it's man hours. You're going to pay for man hours.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. But you'll notice a difference the minute you put that gun in your hand,
Hmm.
and the minute you take that out to start launching rounds, you're going
Right.
to see a very different thing than what you'll ever get from any rack rifle that you'll pick up at Sportsman's or Bass Pro or
Hmm.
any of those places.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's what we strive for. We
Hmm.
strive for doing something different.
Hmm.
Um, and providing a service behind that.
Right.
There's one company that I always say is excellent in the industry, in the firearms industry. They stand behind their product. I have personally seen what they do.
Hmm.
Is Wilson Combat.
Okay.
So if you have a Wilson Combat and 5 years from now it starts malfunctioning or something wrong with it, I have seen where people have sent their gun in on a Thursday
Hmm.
and had it back on a Monday, refinished, resprung, problem fixed, the chamber polished, the feed
Yeah.
ramps polished. It's like a brand new gun again.
Uh-huh.
And it happened that quick.
Wow.
That is not the service you get from HK or Glock
Right.
or any of them, I assure you.
Yes.
Okay. But Wilson Combat, yes,
Yeah.
they are expensive. Okay.
Hmm.
I get it. But you're paying for craftsmanship,
Hmm.
quality, and man hours.
Right.
And that's the thing is like you have to understand why that is that
Mhm.
price. And I have no problem explaining it to somebody like, hey,
Yeah.
listen, there's 80 man hours I went into this gun.
Hmm.
So if you just do 80 man hours by $20 an hour,
Right.
that's a lot of money
Hmm.
just in man hours.
So, what's your opinion of what we're going to call "quote unquote" budget weapons, budget firearms?
So budget firearms are subject to, I say mileage may vary.
Right.
Okay. So what do you consider budget? Because my budget might be different than yours and might be different than his.
Right.
So what
So,
would you consider a budget firearm? Just give me an example.
so the firearms that they sell typically from like Palmetto State Armory, for
Yeah.
instance. Okay. So they're selling AR-15s that can range anywhere from $300 to $700
Sure.
on average, and that's like it's a decent firearm, but it's sort of like comparing cars. Like you can't say that a commuter car that's designed to get you from here, back and forth home to work, yes, it's doing its job, but it's obviously not a Formula One race car. It's not. Those are two completely different things. And I think as long as people sort of understand that difference and are not expecting it to be one thing that it isn't, then that's okay. But they really do need to know that.
So this is my world. So I'm
Hmm.
both a technician and a tactician.
Okay.
And the thing is when you look at Palmetto or
Hmm.
you look at any of these entry level companies, Delton, even you know, Ruger,
Hmm.
Smith and Wesson, M&P series, these
Hmm.
guns are made to be like a what I call a general weapon.
Hmm.
The problem is that it's not going to run every type of ammunition. It's
Hmm.
not going to be reliable in every condition.
Hmm.
There are going to be parts on it that break sooner than on other things.
Hmm.
You may end up in a situation like Smith and Wesson has a tendency that they build these weapons where they have some sort of proprietary parts to them that doesn't match up to other stuff. So
Right.
you can't just easily swap things out.
Hmm.
You have to go to a shop or a gunsmith to do it for you
Hmm.
because a whole assembly might need to be replaced. You've got to look at the three things that I think are important when choosing an AR-15 platform
Hmm.
is your barrel, your bolt carrier group,
Hmm.
and your receiver tolerances, right?
Right.
I'm sorry, but Palmetto guns are very shaky. So are Andersons. I don't sell or work on poverty ponies from Anderson ever. Okay. Take
All
that as
right.
you will. Call me a gun snob. I don't care.
Yeah.
I have seen too many of them with dimensional inconsistencies where
Hmm.
a lower parts kit from even Colt won't fit in them. Okay.
Wow.
So I've seen the fire control groups that are cut out 40 thousandths off,
Hmm.
and there's a problem. Like it won't cycle reliably. I've seen that with Palmetto. I've seen Palmetto guns that they put one round through
Hmm.
and it seizes the gun up and the shell casing is stuck in the chamber. We have to hammer it out.
Right.
Okay. Is that I mean, look, if you're looking at a $300 to $500 gun, save your money
Hmm.
and take a little bit more time and
Hmm.
then get into something that's a little bit better.
Hmm.
I'm not telling you to go out and buy a Knight's Armament. I'm not telling you to buy an LMT.
Right.
I'm not telling you to buy that. Honestly, a lot of the Daniels product, they're very overpriced for what they are.
Hmm.
It's a mil spec weapon, and I hate using that word, but
Right.
it's base. It's a
Hmm.
very base weapon. There are so many other manufacturers out there. One of the people that I really admire and I look at his product and I really like it is Mike over at Sons of Liberty.
Okay.
They make a great rifle for a great price, and
Hmm.
and you know, I'm not touting my own stuff. I'm saying he
Right.
makes a great product, and
Right.
and he's a great guy. He has an unconditional warranty.
Hmm.
Um, I really like his stuff. I spent a lot of time. My group spent a lot of time shooting his stuff at Shot Show, and doing interviews with him and everything, or with his people. I like their product a lot. I think
Hmm.
that they've come a long way and very reliable.
Hmm.
Um, there are others out there, but it's just because it's a black rifle AR-15, they're not all the same.
Right.
Dimensional consistency is an important thing.
Hmm.
Tolerances are an important thing.
Hmm.
If these people are just spitting out guns, they're not taking the time and the care.
Hmm.
And look into Wilson Combat
Hmm.
because it might not be that far out of your price range.
Right.
But take your money and save it, or work some overtime, unless they're not giving you cash overtime anymore. But no,
Right.
work some overtime and
Yeah.
and utilize that
Hmm.
leeway of having that ability.
Hmm.
But there's a difference though between you and maybe a guy that's on patrol that's going to use that rifle because
Hmm.
his life depends on it.
Right.
Okay, let's face it, Colt doesn't really exist as an option anymore.
Right.
Where everybody used to carry Colt 6920s or 6933s, that kind of thing. They're really not where they were,
Hmm.
and they're not up to snuff anymore. If I had to pick a rifle, there's a lot of other people that, or a lot of other manufacturers that people have not heard of
Hmm.
that are very, very good, and that will
Hmm.
be a patrol level, duty level rifle
Hmm.
without a problem. You
Right.
don't need to spend $2,000. You
Right.
don't need to spend $3,000. You are going to spend over $1,000,
Right.
100%.
Yeah. Definitely.
And it's just because number one, tolerances cost money because it's more
Hmm.
time on the machine
Hmm.
and it's a better machine,
Right.
right? So it's a more sophisticated machine. The other thing is man hours cost money
Hmm.
and the material itself. If
Hmm.
you're using the proper materials, it's not like you could get them on discount.
Hmm.
It's the price is the price. It's like a commodity. You're going to pay what you're going to pay.
Right.
So when people realize that, that's good. When they don't, it's hard to explain that to them
Hmm.
because they're like, but Palmetto has them for $3.99. Go get that.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
when it doesn't work, you're going to pay me $100 an hour to make it
Right.
work.
Yeah.
That's fine. I
Uh-huh.
don't have a problem with
Yeah.
that.
Right. We'll take that.
So yeah, good for you. Good on you.
Yeah.
Show me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
so, but the industry has a lot of marketing, and
Hmm.
people spend tons of money on marketing. And I think that the average consumer that's out there that's looking and saying, "Hey, how is a Palmetto gun?" Well, Palmetto spends, let's just say they even spend 100,000 a year on marketing.
Hmm.
And let's say the average other company that's a small company spends $0 a year on marketing.
Hmm.
Well, who's going to pop up in the search results?
Yeah.
Who are they going to, what are they going to see? They're
Right.
going to see Palmetto all over the place because Palmetto's sending guns out to all these people to put them on there and say, hey, this gun ran great because you ran 15 rounds through it or
Hmm.
30 rounds through it or even 100 rounds.
Right.
But the thing is, what kind of groups are you printing?
Hmm.
What kind of reliability does that have in the rain, in the snow, in a dust storm?
Right.
We have haboobs here.
Yes.
Everything gets covered in dust, right?
Right.
So that's what I want to see.
Hmm.
I'm not saying you torture and eradicate every manufactured gun on the market
Hmm.
to figure out where the failing point is. I'm saying I tell people all the time, if the people who are pulling triggers on
Hmm.
other people for this country aren't using that, then you shouldn't be buying it either.
Right. That's a good point.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I'll put a little asterisk in there,
Yeah.
except for the SIG 320 platform.
Okay.
Okay. I don't believe in the SIG 320 platform at all
Why is that?
because of all the problems they've had
Okay.
and the problems that I've personally seen.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of guns blown up, a lot of problems. Military's having a lot of issues with them.
Really?
So I will put a little asterisk there. Now some people will say Berettas are pieces of shit too.
Hmm.
And yeah, if you have one from the military that 2 million rounds went through it, it's going to be a little wobbly,
Right.
100%. But guess what? When that gun was newer, it was
Yeah.
probably awesome.
Yeah.
Probably didn't have any problems. But when it went, you got one issued from the Gulf War,
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
that's probably going to have some issues, right? So,
It's always kind of interesting to me, like how the firearms kind of move in and out of vogue,
right.
because of a lot of different things. But like in the '80s, the those guns were amazing, and that's what everybody wanted to use, right?
Every movie from
You
the
know,
80s that had a
yeah,
cop in it, it
right.
was a Beretta
They were
92,
always had Berettas, right?
right?
So now, like that's almost unheard of. You would never see those things. Now
Now it's
everybody's,
staccatos.
yeah,
Everybody's got
staccatos,
a staccato, and I have a
right?
staccato.
Hmm.
It's amazing.
Hmm.
I love my staccato. Um, and I if you're in the market for one of those 2011 weapons,
Hmm.
skip over everything, go to staccato. Okay. And if you want something even better than that, there's Infinity and things like that.
Right,
But you're paying for man hours. That's what
right.
you're paying for.
Hmm.
You're not paying for the name.
Hmm.
And so, but the staccatos, like mine, are fantastic. I could do things with those guns that I can't do with other guns.
Right.
But I've mastered other platforms and
Hmm.
I've progressed to that.
Yeah.
So there's a difference. I didn't just, say, let me strap a staccato on and see what I could do without ever having any experience,
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, now everybody wants a 2011.
Hmm.
And yeah, they're cool. They're sexy. They're heavy.
Hmm.
That was kind of Glock's claim to fame, right? They carry a lot of bullets and they're really light and they were made for duty. You can
Right.
you can do anything to a Glock. I've been to schools where we've been training for days and somebody will train for days with a broken guide rod in their Glock and it still works and they just have to smack it into battery every once in a while and the gun still runs. Okay.
Nice.
That's a testament to like their quality. Yeah. Now, is it the sexiest gun? Is it the most accurate gun? Does it, get all the flair that, the
Right.
92 got? No.
No.
But if it always works, I can work around all those other things.
Right.
I can even work around if it doesn't have sights on it.
Hmm.
Because if it runs, I can still Kentucky windage that thing in
Right.
to get my shots on target, right? So those are different priorities that different people are going to have.
Yeah.
Um, but like people are always like, well, what's the best gun?
Hmm.
Right? That's the thing I get asked
Yeah,
all the
that's a
time.
horrible question.
Right. Like, okay, for you, for me,
Mhm.
for concealability, for the range,
Mhm.
for a 3-gun competition,
Right.
combat,
Mhm.
like there's a lot of things. Oh, well, just general. Well, okay, well, what's the best car?
Right.
What's the best motorcycle?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
whatever you can afford.
Yeah, there's got to be context to that. Otherwise, you're asking too big of a
Exactly. I
question.
mean, there's no gun that you're going to put into your hand and
Hmm.
become a better shooter because that gun's in your hand.
Right.
I've seen plenty of people spend way too much money
Hmm.
on guns that they have no idea how to operate and can't hit anything.
Right.
And I've seen people that they go out and they buy a police Glock that has tens of thousands of rounds through it that's rickety as shit, and they're shooting, you know, a dime sized hole at 50 yards with it.
Right.
I have personally seen that.
Yeah.
So there there is extreme context to something
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
My thoughts when people say that to me are you need more education
Uh-huh.
on firearms in general.
Hmm.
And number two, you need to go shoot a lot of different firearms
Hmm.
and see what fits your hand, what contours your hand, what feels like less of a recoil impulse that makes you happier.
Hmm.
I've had people say, I don't want to shoot a nine because of the recoil. Really? What recoil?
Yeah.
Like for me, no, I'm a bigger guy.
Hmm.
But like for me, for you, for him, we're average sized people. There's no recoil
Yeah.
like to a nine that is like punishing. I mean, I could shoot 1,000 rounds of a nine in a day. I have at
Yeah.
different events and evolutions in training. But why does somebody perceive that? Because they're shooting a gun that wasn't for them.
Right.
It they had a gun fit to them instead of fitting them to a gun,
Hmm.
right? So it's just they use their boyfriend's gun or their girlfriend's gun or
Right.
their in-laws gun or whatever. Different strokes for different folks, right? In that.
Right.
You may like something that I don't.
Yeah.
I may really like what you have, but I can't get that at this time.
Right.
Patience is a better thing than settling for something you're not going to like.
Yeah.
Never
So
buy a high point just because you don't have another choice.
exactly.
Okay. You know, I don't go out and get a Jennings or a
Hmm.
Lorson or, a Jimenez Arms or any of a Raven 25. I don't go out and get those because I can't afford something else.
Yeah.
If I couldn't afford stuff, I would just work until I could get that money, put it
Right.
aside.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be an impulse buy right now. It can
Right.
be a 6 month goal,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And like I said before, I'm all about taking one or two guns and selling those that I'm not using
Hmm.
to acquire what I do want.
Right.
That's totally viable. Instead of spending money, I don't have to reach into my pocket and spend cash, and I get what I want anyway.
Right.
Perfect.
There you go.
You know. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, guns are a finicky thing. I
Hmm.
mean, I have made a business of guns for the last 17 years of my life. Done very well with it, and I think that guns are something that, like you said, some things are in vogue and some things are not,
Hmm.
and people go through these phases because right now video games are the big thing.
Right.
What's in a video game.
Hmm.
That's what I see. People want that. They
Right.
want whatever that thing is because they perceive it to be better than other things. A lot of times it's not.
Hmm.
So they need more education, more training, and more experience on those things. All the ranges around here, basically, except for the outdoor ones, have guns that you can rent.
Right.
Go and rent some guns. Just try some things out. See
Hmm.
what it is. Take $100 with you for
Right.
ammo
Hmm.
and run ammo through a bunch of different things and see how it
Hmm.
feels.
Yeah.
And if you don't like anything, then we'll try to figure out, something that you do like.
Right.
We'll explore other options, unique
Hmm.
options, that kind of thing.
Right.
Maybe adding a compensator like a afterburner from Radian. Have you seen
Hmm.
those where you put it on a
Hmm.
Glock and it takes like 40% of the 9 millimeter recoil out? So it's like a
Nice.
22 when you shoot it.
Right.
It's fantastic.
Huh.
I mean, there are different things that you can do to mitigate different problems. Oh, the grip isn't comfortable. Okay, well, let's put a hoe grip on it, or let's change the grip panels, or let's get a model of this that has adjustable grips.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different things, but you should never settle for something.
Hmm.
It's just it's not worthwhile.
So that's another thing that I have noticed in the last like probably 5 to 10 years is that there's a much heavier focus on not just those things that you've described, but like just pure aesthetics of the firearms. They're doing so much more with like the slides and the way they're designed, the cuts and things like that that they do to them, um, to like make them more appealing and more interesting than just not everything looks like a Glock. Yeah. You know.
Correct. I mean, aesthetics are one thing. I
Hmm.
mean, in the 90s, we had magnum porting. Everybody wanted a magnum ported weapon where they cut two holes in the barrel and it
Hmm.
would relieve the gases going upwards, which would make your muzzle rise a lot less.
Right.
Now we have compensators and we
Hmm.
also have, chunk porting where they cut the whole top of the barrel out
Right.
and the top of the slide. And you have a much different kind of pressure release
Hmm.
that causes you to stay on target longer. I think a lot of those things are they should be reserved for people who already have a mastery of a platform.
Right.
So when people say, "Oh, hey, I want to get this Zev Glock," or "I want to get this," you know, Karen tactical Glock. Well, they are awesome guns,
Yeah.
and I've shot them, and I would say that's a friggin' amazing choice.
Hmm.
If you're a first time gun buyer, that is a terrible decision.
Right.
Okay, master the platform first, then decide that's my platform. I want to get the best of that.
Right.
You know,
Because at that point, then you could afford to go pay like $4,000 to $6,000 for one firearm.
correct.
You
Right.
know?
I mean, but mastering the platform, people don't want to take the time. They want that.
Yeah.
I call it the Amazon Prime mentality. They
Hmm.
want it now or tomorrow. They don't want to take the time to build their skill set.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, this gun look cool. Well,
Hmm.
looking cool and functioning are two different things.
Right.
You want something that's going to be reliable.
Hmm.
So, you know, I tell people start at the $500 mark because that's
Right.
basically where Glocks are.
Yeah.
They're right at the $500 mark, and start there. Oh, well, what about this Ruger American's on sale for 289? Stay the hell away from it. It's a boat anchor.
Right.
Stay away from it.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, Glocks will always have value,
Hmm.
right? If I came to you and said, listen, man, Rico, I'm having a rough time right now. Will you buy my Glock for me for $450? You'd be like, sure,
Sure.
because that gun's always going to have value to you.
Yeah.
And you know what that gun is, right?
Hmm.
But if I said, hey, listen, I've got this Taurus piece of shit, Brazilian shiny thing with gold accents
Yeah.
that I paid $900 for, will you give me $200? You'd be like, I don't want that fucking thing in my safe,
Right.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
it might disease your other guns, right? So
Right.
there's that part of it too. The
Yeah.
other thing is people think their guns are worth way more than they are,
Hmm.
right? I got guys that are like they put a $100 trigger in their Glock and they try to sell it for $850. Like, listen, bro, you have a $600 gun every day of the week,
Right.
brand new. You've used it. Take 20% off of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So people don't have a realistic perception of what their guns are
Hmm.
worth. I've priced out state gun deals where there's all these different weapons. They're like, oh, he's been collecting for years and this and that, whatever. And not one of those guns is like worth even $200.
Right.
And they think that it's a $50,000, $100,000 collection. Like,
Yeah.
look, I got some really bad news for you. And I always provide them with proof. Like, hey, look, I'm not a pawn shop. I'm not trying to
Right.
screw you over.
Yeah.
But here's what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Or they buy these things that they think are limited editions when they're just scams, you
Right.
know. And that's the thing, educate yourself. Unfortunately, educating yourself online
Hmm.
with gun values and things like that is tough because there's a lot of conjecture and it's subject to interpretation a lot of times. I mean, I've screwed up. I
Hmm.
have completely screwed up. And here's the thing that like I have a fault with. I had somebody that brought me a gun. I looked it up. I was like, hey man, it's worth about $400. On a good day, I'll give you like 350.
Hmm.
And they're like, oh, that's terrible, whatever. And this gun is supposed to be blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't know where you're getting that information, but I'll
Right.
recommend other places for them to go. And then
Yeah.
I send them there and they realize what it is. And they're like, that's a $2,000 gun that I got from, and I didn't know, like, because it was some
Yeah.
sort of rare marked with a G underneath this section or whatever. Like, I
Right.
didn't know that. I looked it up for what it is, what it said on the slide, and
Right.
whatever. So while I am a subject matter expert in the industry, I'm not always 100% correct on
Right.
everything. And that's fine. I'm totally fine with that.
Hmm.
I will never claim to know everything
Right.
about guns, but a lot of people think that their guns are that thing,
Yeah.
and that's not the case. It's just not. So what,
Hmm.
like, I mean, during COVID, people were selling
Hmm.
Palmetto
Right.
guns for $2,000. I saw them. Okay, they were
Wow.
going into gun shops and trying to trade them in for $1,500.
Wow.
Okay, that's absurd. And because ARs were so limited, there was like just a
Yeah.
run on guns.
Right.
By May of 2020, there were no guns on the shelves at anywhere in this valley that
Yeah.
were worth a shit.
Yeah.
Like nothing that was worth a shit was on the shelves, and we couldn't get anything from distributors or suppliers. Luckily, I keep a healthy amount of inventory. We had a healthy amount of inventory, and
Right.
we were able to profit on that pretty well. I mean, that
Hmm.
was a great thing. COVID was a record-setting year for the gun industry, record-setting 2 years for the gun industry.
Yeah.
But the thing is you've got to look at um, the realistic reality of what you have
Hmm.
in that platform.
Right.
The other thing is people want to put $100 light on there and they think it's worth $300 now. Like it doesn't add that kind of value.
Right.
I always tell people, listen, keep this light, keep this optic, keep that. I have no interest in that.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, but that no, you're thinking you're going to get this worth nothing to me.
Hmm.
I don't like that brand. Don't
Yeah.
like that optic. I
Hmm.
don't want a red dot. I want a green, gold,
Right.
right? So that's the thing. It's different strokes for different folks. You might be able to find a guy that wants that. I
Hmm.
don't,
Yeah.
you know, not interested. And then they get upset with you. Like, you don't know what this is? I know exactly what it is. That's why I don't want
Yeah. Right.
it. You know?
Right.
But it's not being a snob about it. It's
Yeah.
it's being realist. Like, I'm
Hmm.
sorry. Just because you put a Lamborghini body kit on your Pontiac Fiero does not mean it's a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
It's not how that works.
No, no,
Hmm.
you know? So the gun industry is an interesting animal in and of itself
Hmm.
because the gun industry works on the political roller coaster,
Uh-huh.
right? So when politicians try to steal your guns or take your guns or enact more laws and people get panicky and they're like, this is going to happen and that's going to happen and this ban and that ban, then all of a sudden guns fly off the shelves.
Right.
Otherwise, it's the most stagnant business you've ever seen.
Hmm.
And if you're in the industry, you try to figure out how can I make money?
Hmm.
So you start selling large quantities of ammo. You start selling more accessories. You start running training to augment where you're not selling firearms.
Right.
And like fortunately, over the many years that I've been in this industry, I've figured out there are certain things that are constant and there's certain things that are occasional.
Hmm.
And so I stick with the more constant area
Right.
now. And
Hmm.
then, I consult for people and I teach them to do the same.
Hmm.
Because if you're pouring all your money into cowboy action shooting and that stuff's not moving,
Right.
well, that's a problem. That's a lot of
Yeah.
money that you have in inventory that
Hmm.
you're not utilizing to keep this business afloat.
Right.
You should be putting it over there into whatever it might be, long
Hmm.
range tactical or, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And people are going to come in and see that and be like, oh, I've been looking for one of those. And you're the only one in the valley that has it. That's the kind of thing, you know?
Right.
So, but the industry's a finicky bitch. It
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
is. It really is.
So kind of on the other side of this, so like after people get their firearms, I know this is something that happens way more than it should. People they go out and they buy a firearm, whatever amount of money they paid for, or whatever brand it is, right? And they say, "Okay, I'm protected now. I've got a firearm." It's like that isn't it. That is by far, in a way, like the end of that story. Okay. The next biggest thing that you need to do is learn how to fucking use the thing, and train really well with it. And then you need to put yourself into scenarios, which is where we get into guardian training and consulting with Josh, right?
Right.
Where he has a simulator that he can run through, and put you in a real life scenario that like is designed to like get you as close as absolutely possible to being in a shooting incident without actually being in one, which to me is the most valuable situation or training that people can go through because otherwise they don't ever understand what the situation is like and how they are going to react to it.
I love that system. And Josh is excellent with that.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in him and what he's doing in his mission. He's got a great team of people that are helping him.
Hmm.
The simulator, for me, I've seen people that are very well versed, very experienced
Hmm.
get into that and their heart rate goes up to 170.
Yeah.
And it's basically like a big video game,
Right.
but it's the immersion.
Right.
You're totally immersed in that scenario.
Hmm.
And your mind, if you're doing that scenario properly,
Hmm.
your mind is totally focused on what's going on.
Right.
And that's going to be the greatest indicator of how you are going to act should that ever happen on the street.
Right.
So I think what Josh is doing is
Hmm.
is fantastic. I think that it has so much potential and people are not realizing it.
Right.
They just don't. Whether it's people's aversion to costs or whatever, which there's ways to mitigate that. You have a party at your house, bring the simulator to your house and
Hmm.
have 25 people and now it's, a couple dollars a person or whatever.
Right.
But the thing is I think training is the paramount thing that everybody misses in this industry.
Right.
Nobody wants to go out there and buy a $500 Glock and then go out and spend another $500 in ammunition for a $500 class.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
But me, like an idiot, over the last 20 years, 23 years, I've done that countless amounts of times.
Hmm.
I've gone out and, I've brought thousands of rounds to, different training and different evolutions and things like that. And learned so much. And whether it's a basic class
Hmm.
or an advanced class, I always say there's no such thing as an advanced gunfight. It'll all go to shit once the bullets start flying.
Right.
So learn your craft. If you're going to be carrying a gun,
Hmm.
learn how to use that in any scenario. Don't sit there and say, well, I'll never have to shoot under a car. I'll never have to shoot from behind a mailbox. Well, how do you know
Well,
that?
yeah,
Are you so certain that you're never going to be in that situation?
yeah.
I mean, look, they just had a shooting on the beach in Jacksonville, Florida yesterday.
Hmm.
I think it was some gangbangers or something they figured out, but I posted it up on my thing because it's spring break.
Hmm.
Everybody's drunk. Everything is, a little
Right.
bit nuts and really crowded. Gunfire breaks out. What do people do?
Yeah.
Panic,
Yeah.
scream, panic, run in every direction, right? So if you're the calm one and you're able to assess that situation
Hmm.
and you choose to act, wouldn't you want to be victorious?
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Right.
I'm not going to go out unless somebody comes up from behind me. I'm not going out without a fight.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Hmm.
Unless it's an ambush situation, then I have no recourse and no action. But
Right.
I will never just sit there and take it.
Hmm.
I have literally had people that have told me that they are so afraid of guns or they don't approve of guns. They don't believe in guns, which
Hmm.
it's a factual thing. Like it's right there. It's tangible. You can touch it.
Yeah.
So the fact that you believe in it is irrelevant, right?
Right.
But they've literally said that to me. I'm like, what if two armed people
Hmm.
break your front door down and they come in here and intend to do you and your children harm? And their answer to me is, well, then I guess I'll just die. Like you don't owe it to your kids to keep them alive. You
Right.
don't owe it to your wife or your girlfriend to keep her alive.
Hmm.
Like, are you serious? Like, these are basic human instincts, like
Right.
survival.
Right.
Like, you'll just fold? Okay.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, but hearing that from people is disturbing. Now, I have had people that I've trained
Hmm.
that they can't even touch a gun because they've been traumatized by firearms.
Hmm.
Okay, they've been robbed, they've been shot, they've been threatened, they've been maybe raped at gunpoint, things like that.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of these different things over the years where I've helped to train these people, and by the end of the day, I've got them shooting different things, different platforms, see what they like,
Hmm.
to the point where almost every one of them didn't need, one needed a second time going out. They all wanted to purchase a firearm after that.
Well,
They went from being absolutely afraid
right.
to wanting to own a firearm and start shooting.
Hmm.
And that is a thing that I take a lot of pride in because I take a lot of time and I
Hmm.
want to understand.
Right.
Like I don't want you to relive that trauma,
Hmm.
but I want to understand what the issue is and where it comes from.
Right.
And I know that's difficult for people, but it can become a cathartic thing for you.
Right.
It really can. Like I just took a group of people out who had never shot a 50 cal.
Yeah.
So I have access. One of the guys that works with me, he has a Macmillan TAC 50. And it's
Hmm.
not just a Macmillan TAC 50. It's Rob Furlong, the Canadian sniper with the 1 point something mile kill shots in
Really
Afghanistan. It's his Macmillan TAC 50.
nice.
So I didn't tell them that until
Hmm.
after they shot it.
Right.
And so they went out. They had no experience with it. Give them a quick rundown. I said, look, all you gotta do is look through this thing and gently touch that thing,
Yeah.
and you're good,
Right.
right? And I'll show you some pictures and video after we're done.
Right.
But they were pros at it, and so two of them are from the People's Republic of New Jersey,
Uh-huh.
and two of them live in Tucson. Now the ones in Tucson had a home invasion happen, armed
Wow.
home invasion, where they actually shot out the back door of the house, the sliding glass door of the house, and then entered into the home.
Mm.
Really terrible situation. I don't
Mhm.
wish that upon anybody. That is
Right.
horrific. And to be traumatized like that, and any home invasion, but an armed home invasion like that is even more crazy.
Mhm.
And so they went out and they bought a bunch of different firearms, and their choices may not have been the best ones because
Mhm.
they got sold a bill of goods by people at Sportsman's Warehouse.
'Kay.
And so they chose a bunch of things that are not exactly incredible.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I had to give them the bad news of, listen, these platforms aren't exactly what you're going to want for your particular application.
Right.
Luckily, they had a couple guns that were good. They had a couple Glocks, which were fine.
Mhm.
The other things they got sold because the salesman made commission or spiff on those guns,
Right.
and he saw a sucker coming. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
that happens.
Yeah.
And that listen, if you're uneducated in the industry, it's going to happen.
Mhm.
And people are opportunists.
Mhm.
So if a particular salesman is feeling extra used carsy that day, they're going to sell you all kinds of stuff to make them the most money they can.
Right.
I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I am very different when it comes to that. I
Mhm.
see the industry differently. I see the application differently.
Hmm.
Like I tell people all the time, they're like, I want to buy an AR. Well, what are you going to do with it? Well,
Right.
I'm going to shoot it. What are you going to do? Are you going to go
Yeah.
target shooting with it? Are you going to enter into a competition with it? Are you going to use it for home defense? Are you going to sit in your closet? Are you going to use it as a truck gun? These are all factors that will determine barrel size, weight, optics,
Right.
triggers, grips, stocks, braces, rails. That's all things that go into how do I build this to be the optimal package for you,
Right.
right? So that's purpose built weaponry, right?
Hmm.
So when you walk into Sportsman's Warehouse, they're going to say, well, I get $35 if I sell this gun to this guy this week.
Hmm.
I'm going to sell that gun to that guy because he doesn't know what he wants anyway. Never tell somebody you don't know what you're doing. Never tell somebody
Yeah.
you're a beginner. Never would you come on. Are you going to go to like the motorcycle place? Be like, I've never ridden a bike before. They'll be like, this Hayabusa is what you want,
Right.
right? Because they're
Yeah.
going to be like, this guy's a sucker. He'll buy anything. He doesn't know.
Yeah.
Just don't be so forthcoming,
Yeah.
right? Especially if you walk in and you're like, hey, I had a home invasion. We'll sell you all this shit. Here you go.
There you
Here's a
go.
list. Do you have an Amex? Like
Right.
that's the problem. It's
Hmm.
the industry in a lot of shops, not all of them. There are some
Hmm.
good ones. There are some great ones that I recommend, but in a lot of shops they're predatory.
Right.
And that goes to another thing is women.
Right.
When women go into buy a gun, everybody wants to sell them a snub nose revolver. And I'm like, look, I have a snub nose revolver. It's my
Yeah.
California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts gun.
Right.
When I go to those places, I have a snub nose revolver on.
Uh-huh.
Number one, no shell casings are going to end up on the ground.
Right.
And number two, I'll get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about picking up casings or anything like that. Should I get into a critical incident, right?
Right.
Now, I don't advise anybody to do what I do, right? So I do my own
This
thing.
is
I take my own
pure
consequence.
hypothetical.
That's purely hypothetical. Should that ever arise, right? But I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I wish I had a gun.
Right.
Okay. I tell people all the time, I don't shower without a gun on. That's pretty much
Yeah.
how I stand with it. Okay.
Okay.
And if there's an absolutely non permissible place, which by the way, here's the reality a lot of metal detectors do not work.
Okay.
And I used to subcontract for a company where I would go into secured facilities
Right.
and I'd have a gun on and they would not even
Really.
make noise. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
A lot of times when there's groups of people or whatever waiting in line,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying like TSA or anything like that.
Right.
I'm saying private places,
Right.
right? I would never try to get into a government installation or government
Right.
security with a firearm. But private installations, a lot of times if people are lining up because of shift change or whatever, they'll literally like hit a button to make it go or whatever, and it's not actually even working
Huh.
because they have to be serviced and maintenance and things like that. It costs money.
Right.
So a lot of them don't work. So I've been inside of facilities with a gun on me where
Huh.
it's supposed to be ultra secure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a far and few between. You got to know what you're doing with that.
Right.
Non-permissive environments, there's ways to get around those kinds of things.
Hmm.
Now, if I absolutely can't, I have a knife and I know what I'm doing with the knife. I'm
Hmm.
very trained with a knife.
Right.
I'm a practitioner of Kali, Silat, Eskrima, things like that. So if I absolutely cannot have a gun or I'm in a foreign country,
Hmm.
then I have a knife.
Right.
So, and if you can't have a knife, then a screwdriver works amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Simple flathead screwdriver that you could buy anywhere
Hmm.
in any country in the world. And no one's going to think you're weird because just tell me you're an electrician.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
and yeah, sure, there is countries where you can't have anything. But in
Hmm.
most countries, or I'm sorry, when you're traveling into most countries or out of most countries, a knife in your check bag is not a big deal.
Hmm.
They don't care. It's not a factor. So I always have a knife. And you don't have to keep it on your pocket on the clip. You keep it in your pocket
Right.
or keep it behind your belt,
Uh-huh.
so the clip isn't seen, so nobody suspects anything, right?
Right.
So that's, believe me, I'm never without something somewhere.
Right.
So, and I think people should take it upon themselves to always be prepared for the worst
Right.
because everyone, when you see them getting interviewed, well, who would have thought this would happen? Me,
Yeah.
I would have thought that.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's completely feasible.
So it's kind of a funny progression that we've gone through in our history. Like you think back to the old west, right? People used to rob banks and stagecoaches and shit like that, right? At once upon a time, there weren't bars on those windows. They put the bars up because they got robbed, right? And then now you go to a bank and they have bulletproof glass. It's like they have all these things in place because of the things that have happened, right? It didn't just happen on its own, right? It's a direct result of historical, events that happened enough times that we decided, hey, we needed to like do something about this, right? So you have to understand that like all of the things that we have in place, good or bad, TSA is an example of that. It's like just like you said, how many people have they actually caught or stopped? It's like probably none.
They've caught more of us with firearms or knives on us
Yeah,
accidentally
right.
than they
You
have,
know,
terrorists looking to do us
yeah,
harm, right?
somebody who didn't realize they had a fucking an empty shell casing like in
Yeah.
there,
Oh, yeah.
from being out on range day. It's like now they're getting whatever. So,
It's mega fines too.
yeah,
It's not like 100 or 250. It's thousands of dollars.
yeah,
Like it's not,
hmm
for an accident.
hmm
I mean, and don't get me wrong. Yes, again, if people do things wrong,
hmm
then yeah, there should be consequence.
right.
But let's have that discretion.
Yeah, the get back to
Okay.
discretion thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's have some discretion here.
Uh-huh.
That zero tolerance bullshit, that doesn't fly with me.
Right.
I was taught to see things in all shades of gray.
hmm
There is no black and white. Okay.
Right.
Just like there is no situation that will always be like, I know what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
Well, then you're a psychic and you should be making a lot more money than being a
Right.
cop.
Yeah.
Right. So
Exactly.
that's the thing. If you tell me what the numbers are tonight that are going
Mhm.
to come out on the Mega Millions, right?
Yeah.
That's what you should be doing if that's
hmm
the case. Yeah,
Right.
I think that discretion is the lost art of police work. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And law enforcement in general, not just police work,
hmm
law enforcement in general. TSA is a great example of that.
Right.
I mean, how many times have you gone through and people are overly aggressive and overly assertive for no reason?
Yeah.
Bro, calm down.
Yeah.
It's rush hour. Yeah, you're probably stressed, but look,
hmm
nothing's happening. No one's in
hmm
your face. No one's
Right.
yelling at you.
Right.
It's just a laptop. Relax yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Unclench.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you're in the military.
hmm
I mean, people approach you, you're not like a complete statue asshole to them.
Right.
You'll approach determines response, right? If they come at
Yes.
you like a shithead, you're gonna treat them like a shithead.
Right.
If they come at you and they're like, "Hey, sir, I just have a question," you're like, "Oh, hey, no problem. Like, here you go."
Right.
I mean, that's just human nature. It's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But they're teaching people to be different, and it's not in a good way.
Yeah.
It's a progressive way, and that's what I don't like.
Yeah. I don't like that word altogether.
Yeah, I don't like it at all. I won't even buy their insurance.
Yeah.
That's what I don't like.
Change your name.
Change the name. Yeah, I won't even do that.
Wow.
But that's the thing, right? I mean, people. Let's put it. People have no regard for human life anymore. I don't know why, but in the
Mhm.
last 20 years, there's like no regard for human life. They will kill people for nothing.
Mhm.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, do you see that fight with those two teenage girls, where the one smashed the other one's head into the concrete, and
Wow.
kept smashing her head into the concrete, and now the girl's like in a coma, and this is like a high school fight. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? You're going to kill somebody over what?
Yeah.
What was it? Like, I mean, it was nothing important, right?
Right.
There's nothing that could have possibly been a life and death situation or self defense situation where that was warranted.
Right.
No, don't get me wrong. If I'm fighting a guy hand to hand or something like that, or he's got a knife and I grab him and the only thing I can do is smash his head into the ground to knock him unconscious, I will do that all day long.
Yeah. Right.
100%. No problem.
Yes.
But in that situation, come on. That's
Mhm.
ridiculous. And these kids are doing things with impunity nowadays.
Right.
They are robbing, stealing, they are carjacking, and not enough of them are getting a consequence. There
Right.
should be a major consequence to something like
There
that.
should be.
Whether it's imprisonment or disfigurement or paralysis or whatever.
Right.
A 9 millimeter to the spine would solve that situation
Mhm.
very quickly.
Yeah.
So that and there, yeah, okay. California, not everybody could carry guns, although now they have a concealed carry permit that you can get in California.
Right.
But there's a lot of places that you can't
Mhm.
carry,
Right.
or they try to make it ridiculously restrictive.
Mhm.
New Jersey now, you can apply for a carry permit.
Right.
So there are different things because of court rulings and because of groups like Firearms Policy Coalition,
Mhm.
Gun Owners of America. They're
Right.
going out there and actually doing God's work. There's other
Yes.
three-letter organizations
Right.
that aren't doing shit.
Right.
I mean, let's just face it, they aren't doing
They're
anything.
they're too busy being weaponized by our administration.
Correct. They are political pawns,
Mhm.
which, rounding back to what we talked about at the beginning,
Yeah.
much like the unions in Arizona DOC.
Mhm.
They have no real power.
Yeah.
They collect money and they don't really do anything.
Hmm.
And they negotiate with the enemy.
Right.
Unacceptable.
So this is something I have brought up numerous times, and I'll say it again. We need accountability.
Yes.
There needs to be accountability on all levels. The fact that we have a two-tier justice system right now, and it's just like you said, it's blatant. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. They don't even pretend that it's not going on. It's like, nope, this is what it is, and you can't do anything about it. You know,
You're
and
just
it's
a pleb.
yeah,
Oh, the
you
plebs
know,
are over there. They'll stay over there. We're the elite. We're over here.
right. You
And
know,
yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
it really is. It's like how long before that fucking snaps?
It's going to implode.
Yeah,
And this is the thing. I think that this country, for the most part, people want to be left alone. They want to be
yeah,
left alone. They'll pay their mortgage, put it into their pension. They want to do their 8 and hit the gate. You've heard
yeah,
that term 100 times,
right.
right? That's what they want to do.
Hmm.
And when the government keeps making it more and more difficult for them to do that, or more and more difficult for them to live
Hmm.
because of the cost of living, or the cost of housing, or the cost of taxes, or the cost of tolls, or the cost of whatever,
Hmm.
that's when people really get fed up. And I think we're at this precipice where, I mean, you've seen the political landscape and what's happening.
Hmm.
There's a lot less people on the blue side
Hmm.
getting reelected or elected into positions
Right.
that were strongholds for years.
Yeah.
So, what does that tell you? It tells you that some people are starting to wake up,
Right.
but we need the majority of people to wake
Yeah.
up.
We need to wake them up now,
Right.
not 5 years from now, not 10.
Correct.
There's
True.
too many things that are happening, and this country is going too far the wrong direction for us to wait any longer.
But I think that the other part of that is you've got a lot of people that are easily influenced
Hmm.
by money.
Yeah.
And money isn't everything if you're compromising your morals.
Right.
So I always said, like, if a situation arose and someone asked me to do something that was completely illegal
Hmm.
in the firearms industry, whatever that might be,
Hmm.
there would have to be a significant amount of millions of dollars in an offshore bank account and a really good out for me
Right.
with several passports
Yeah.
before I would consider that.
Yeah.
Because my integrity is worth more than whatever they're about to offer
Right.
me.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, if there's $5 million, and then
Yeah.
that's a different story,
Yeah.
right? But nonetheless, that's probably not going to happen,
Right.
right? So, and I say probably, but
Yeah.
probably not going to happen. I'm not willing to compromise the person I am
Hmm.
for a couple of dollars
Right.
because I'm going to make that money anyway.
Yeah.
Money is a tool, and
Hmm.
I'm not at a point. I'm not Tony Robbins rich or Glenn Cardone or what's it, Grant Cardone rich or
Hmm.
anything like that. But I can tell you that I don't need to have an extra whatever thousands or hundreds of thousands to do somebody's bidding.
Right.
It's not interesting to me. What's
Hmm.
interesting to me is to enact real change,
Hmm.
not fake left change,
Right.
which just lines somebody's pockets down the road.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, the right is in that group too. I People are always like, "Oh, well, are you more a Republican or are you more of a Democrat?" No, here's the deal. I'm a constitutional traditionalist. I don't give a shit about any of those other titles.
Right.
If it ain't in the Constitution, it's not important.
Right.
It's just not important to me.
Hmm.
So that's how I look at it. I used to give people, when they purchase firearms at my store, I would give them a copy of the Pocket Constitution.
Okay.
You know how many people were like, I've never read it? Like, great. Here's your excuse. Now you can read it.
Right.
Now you have a copy. Read
Yeah.
it. Make it your toilet reading, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
You know, instead of scrolling through your phone on Instagram and Facebook, which I'm guilty of
Mhm.
too,
Right.
read the Constitution. Actually figure out, what are your rights? Why are those rights put in that specific order?
Yeah.
Why are those things? Why were they so important?
Hmm.
These are things that people don't do.
Right.
They just don't anymore, man. And it's upsetting. It really
Well,
is.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier, because by and large, people just want to live their lives and be left alone.
Mhm.
And so they think I shouldn't, I'm not trying to speak for everybody because I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but I think in a lot of cases, there are people who think that if they just go to work and they just do the thing and they pay their taxes, that things will just be okay. And the problem is that isn't true anymore. I'm not sure that it ever was, but it certainly isn't true now. It's like there are so many things that are happening behind the scenes that aren't being made obvious to people that they don't understand that are costing them their livelihood. The amount of inflation that we have in this country right now and the skyrocketing prices of everything because the dollar is being so diminished is because of all the political things that are happening with nobody gets to vote on. We're going
That's
to
right.
give trillions of dollars to another country for what? You know, we have all of these fucking agencies, the the CDC, the FDA, the fucking, you go right down that list of all of these giant government organizations that do basically nothing, but they're absorbing trillions of dollars, and most of that is our tax money that's being stolen from us. You know,
People don't stand up for it.
they don't, because they don't think they see it. They don't think they understand that that's
You
what's
know,
actually happening.
it's a shame because I think people don't realize how easy it would be if they would join forces and come
Yeah,
together against those types of things.
right,
I mean, it'd be very simple.
right,
Just remember, the people in DC or the people in your capital work for you.
right.
They are civil servants.
Hmm.
That's what they are. That's their title. Police officers are civil servants.
Hmm.
Corrections officers, you're a civil servant.
Hmm.
Same type of thing.
Right.
You work for the people, keep the people safe. I think nowadays everybody has this idea of, well, they're going to cheat anyway, so what's the point?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think about that every time too.
Hmm.
And while that might be true, and highly likely it is true in a lot of areas across this country,
Hmm.
if more people showed up, I mean, what are the percentages of people that actually go out and vote? I think it's like 40% or less.
Right.
So, of eligible voters, let's make that very clear.
Yes.
Okay. Legal, eligible voters,
Right.
I think it's only like 40% or somewhere around there that actually go out and take the time to vote. Well, what if that number went up by just 10%?
Yeah.
That would fuck up the other side's game
Hmm.
entirely. They
Right.
wouldn't be able to account for it.
Hmm.
But people don't want to take the time. And election day in this country, you I don't know what the rules are for certain things, but it's my understanding that most people have off or, in corporate jobs and things like that because it's election day.
Right.
Now, in government jobs, they're supposed to afford you the option to
Right.
be able to vote, if you want to, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. But you also have absentee voting.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of options to get your not mail-in voting. Okay.
Right.
I don't believe in that. So while it is a thing and it's tangible and you could hold that ballot in your hand to do mail-in voting,
Right.
I don't believe in mail-in voting. Absentee voting is a different
Hmm.
thing.
Right.
But when they're ballot harvesting and all that other crap,
Right.
no way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nefarious action. That's
Yeah.
what it is.
Hmm.
There's no two ways about it. So I think that people need to take responsibility for
Hmm.
what's happening. And most people want to just blame somebody else or don't want to take responsibility because it's not easy to take responsibility.
Right.
It takes a special type of person with a certain amount of, looking into like, hey, what do I need to change? What do I need to think about?
Hmm.
If you don't have that insight,
Hmm.
you're not gonna be able to do it.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. And more people need to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to bitch and moan and complain when it's not going well, but
Right.
nobody wants to do anything to correct that ship's course.
Yeah.
You know, and those of us that do, unfortunately, there aren't enough of us.
Right.
There's just not. We need
Hmm.
more. You
Definitely.
know, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts at least.
There you go.
So
So I think that we've covered a lot.
yeah,
I think this is probably a good place to stop because it affords us the opportunity to have a part two.
right, absolutely.
It's been a great time talking with you.
Same here.
And this is something that we don't always do, but I generally try to throw this in here. Um, what's your best dad advice?
My best
Dad,
advice? Oh, dad advice.
dad advice.
I'm not a dad.
That's okay.
So, um, but I will tell you that I think that, so the way that I was raised,
Hmm.
um, being first generation Italian, my mom was right off the boat from Italy.
Okay.
So she was very strict and very particular
Right.
and 4'8" and 78 pounds.
Hmm.
Okay. And she ruled with an iron fist. She was the enforcer. My
Right.
dad was not the enforcer. So, my thought on dad advice is actions have consequences,
Hmm.
and I don't think the children learn that enough nowadays. I think that when I was, I'm in my 40s now, so when I was being raised, a swift dose of belt cured a lot of problems. Okay, and so, and if it wasn't a swift dose of belt, it was a paddle, or it
Yeah.
was a wooden spoon,
Right.
or it was whatever object wasn't nailed down, right,
Right.
would solve the problem.
Yeah.
So, and my siblings would agree
Uh-huh.
that that I think that's what molded me. I
Uh-huh.
think that's what made me into, kind of who I am today
Right.
is, having a strict upbringing, like not ridiculously strict. I didn't
Right.
sit there looking at the wall all day or anything like that. It wasn't a prison, but my mom had certain things that,
Yeah.
whatever. The other thing is, how many times do you go out and you see these kids in the stores in Target, Walmart, the mall, and they throw a temper tantrum, and the parents are just like, "Come on, you're going to get a timeout when you get home." My mom would beat my ass in the store, on the way out of the store, in the car, on the way home, when we got home, the next morning, in case I didn't get it straight the night before, right? So let's face it, actions need to have consequences,
Yes, they really do.
and they don't. And that's, I think, a direct result of like the '90s of like they get a timeout and children have feelings and whatever. My feelings didn't matter when I was a child.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be seen and not heard. That was what I got told a lot, right? And I by no means was abused in any way. I had a
Right.
great childhood and
Yeah.
great upbringing, and my family was awesome. But yeah, I'm telling you, actions have consequences. That needs to be instilled in people and needs to be something that is brought back around.
Right. So, well, this is a fantastic place for us to end. So, once again, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad you were able to come in.
Same here. Thank you
And
very much for having me.
yeah,
Look forward to coming back.
absolutely. We'll talk
Yeah,
more soon.
perfect.
All right.
Thanks for you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, you can now support the Non-Victim Nation by donating via listener support directly on Spotify. Remember, the story of your life is being written right now, and you are the hero.